Okay, we're fixing to work over the Passover concept. Passover is coming up. So what? We got Passover going on every heartbeat. Every heartbeat is Passover. Some people acknowledge times and days and certain things, and some people consider every day the same. But the most important thing is the teaching of the former covenant and the present covenant. In the former covenant, oh, sorry, crippled, I'm hurting, I don't have any help, I'm trying to do this on my own. Okay, Passover, the former covenant, Passover once a year. That's it. The new covenant, as often as possible. The new covenant, the post-Yeshua end time emergency time covenant, as often as possible. Passover, as often as possible. Passover, once a year. Okay, former covenant, what are the details? Okay, number one, in the former covenant, how do you do atonement for sin? What's your atonement? You got temple and tabernacle. That's where the atonement is connected. You got two things. Jesus had two things in his life. He had the Havirah, the brotherhood group, the home group, and the synagogue. The Havirah is highest value. That's where your atonement comes from. The synagogue is a lesser value. That's in a learning environment. It is not the place where you open your hearts up. Okay? This is information debate. That is family atonement, an open-hearted family, Havirah. All right? So, every year at Passover, once a year, you have the Passover Seder, and the sin lists and the lamb go from the Havirah, they go from the Passover Seder, the sin lists and the lamb go to the temple and tabernacle, and your sins are covered. That's how your sins are atoned for. Your grandfather lists the sins that have come to the family against the law of Moses over the past year, and those sin lists are sent with a little lamb that has been nurtured by the children. The children all know that that little lammy is going to be killed for the sins of their whole family, and the grandpops tell the sin lists. And then those sin lists are taken to the temple tabernacle, where one man goes in and sits on the supernatural box, and that's the atonement for sin. But now we're going to shift to true sin problems. My number one sin was no true teaching about the new covenant. There was no repetitive Passover. There was no repetitive sin lists and working with the lamb. There was just a bunch of information. There was information. It was a debate. It was a talking place. It wasn't a family cleansing and joyful place. It wasn't a celebration of freedom place. It was just a talking place and a performance place. So my great sin, my number one sin, I want to tell you my sin first. My sin was not seeking to stay fresh and pure before my lifeguard, my strongest spirit. My strongest spirit, Yeshua, visited. And I was not seeking to stay fresh and pure before my lifeguard, my strongest spirit, by getting in the shelter of men in total honesty with one another and sweet God friend in a cluster of family, in a Havirah. Why was I sinning in that way? I wasn't seeking, and I wasn't getting into the shelter. I wasn't seeking to stay fresh, and I wasn't getting into the shelter of man. Why? Why was I sinning? I was sinning. I was screwed up because of messed up Christianity and because of unwise parents and teachers and elders. The people did not know. So I was wrecked. When I was 14 years old, I could feel there was something very, very, very wrong. There was something very, very wrong with the so-called New Covenant, the churchianity. I could tell there was something wrong, because if they were wise about everything and true about everything, they didn't address my feel-good. They didn't address my pleasurable desires and figure out how to handle that. If you're not caring about male human beings and what they're going through in the pleasure department, then your first trouble, the way that you're conceived, the way that children are conceived, is not being dealt with. If you don't care about dealing with those things, if this is weird to you that I'm bringing these things up, then shut down and go away. But come back someday if you want to have true Pesach, true Passover, true atonement for sin as often as possible. Here's the deal. In the new covenant, you're willing to die like Jesus. In the former covenant, you have to make babies because Messiah might come from your babies. Now, you're willing to die like Jesus, the baby that did come through the Jews. Now you get into a closed family group holding everybody responsible to Yeshua teaching and outreach and service and work. The connection as disciples is work. The word disciple, the root word is discipline. We are disciplined and working. We're in a family group, a Havirah, a highest value Havirah, doing sinless with the Lamb all the time. Passover is as often as possible. We are a closed family group holding everyone in that family circle responsible to Yeshua teaching and outreach and service work. We are a joyful celebration. The word Eucharist means celebration party. So we are a joyful celebration. We are the family freedom party. We're the Yahoo! We get to take off the mask of the world and actually be total friends of our highest spirit, our lifeguard. Yahoo! We have a constant heart cleansing. We cleanse our hearts before the baptism. We cleanse our hearts. We openly admit the things that we're doing wrong before the baptism. We're bold and we let people know, here's my game, here's what I've been up to, here's my problems. And then before prayer, we cleanse our hearts. Before worship or study, the first thing we do is we constantly clear our hearts. What is going on wrong? What are your responsibilities that you're being lazy about? This is the reality. Passover, as often as possible. Now, we're going to have a nice Passover meal here. We're going to have an al fresco Passover that will be just marvelous. We're going to have an al fresco Passover be just marvelous to help people feel and learn and understand what it's like. But this time when we have Passover, we're going to do the sin lists. We are actually going to do the stuff that we do in the rehab centers where people sit down and say, look, I want to let you know, I stole my grandmother's car. I stole everybody's jewelry. People hated me for a long time. I got my friends hooked on drugs, etc., etc. Those lists are going to be presented at the Passover Seder. That's the purpose for the Seder, is the atonement for sin and the celebration of the Lamb to come. Well, guess what? The Lamb has come. We are post-Yeshua. We're in the end-time emergency time. And we should be having sin lists and the Lamb as often as possible as a meal in our homes. There is no longer a temple or tabernacle. There's no longer one man. There's a cluster of spirit-filled peoples that come together. Because of messed up Christianity and unwise parents and unwise teachers and unwise elders, I was in darkness. And right now at 64 years old, I am just beginning to invite people to do what somebody could have invited me to do when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. Come on, people. Let's do this Passover. Who wants to come to Passover and do this amazing celebration out in a field with a beautiful table and a bunch of wonderful people with 4 glasses of wine and an amazing feast and so many things to say and learn?